So I found this quite an interesting article by a guy called Richard Porat from the New European, and it's all about gatecrashing a Brexiteers' big day out. It was the Leave Means Leave event that they held, 2 weeks ago now? 3 weeks ago, was it? It was relatively recent. So, while Remainers are on the march most weekends, driving the demand for a people's vote at protest rallies across Britain, Brexiteers don't seem to get out much. Since their victory in 2016, rank-and-file Leavers have largely surrendered the public space to their rivals, just as their leaders have squandered the initiative. So last weekend's Leave Means Leave rally at the University of Bolton Stadium gave a rare opportunity to take the grassroots temperature and, with the people's vote now very much a prospect, see who is still marching for the cause. The answer is, for the most part, middle-aged, middle-class folk who filled the stadium car park with Range Rovers, BMWs, Audis, and a preponderance of tweed, wax jackets, radiant of their distinctive fashion look, pioneered by Paul Nuttall and others, gave it a feel of a UKIP gathering. Indeed, Nigel Farage was to provide the day's star turn, although the presence of a Labour MP, Kate Hockney, and former Brexit Secretary David Davis underlined that this was a cross-party gathering. And the event certainly attracted all elements of the Leave spectrum, including the extremists. In the car park, I was greeted by a skinhead in a black bomber jacket saying, "Can I give you this?" He thrust a leaflet into my hand and explained, "She's the future of this country. Check the website out, you'll love it." As he spoke, he jabbed a finger on the picture of Anne-Marie Walters, scowling back from the pamphlet. Walters was beaten for the leadership of the UKIP by Henry Bolton a year ago. She has previously claimed that the European Union is conspiring to turn the continent into a Muslim state. After quitting UKIP, she founded the Far Right for Britain, which while kept out in the cold in the car park, is now scrambling for supporters among Brexit's foot soldiers. Back in the queue, the chatter had moved on to how Sky News and the BBC wouldn't dare cover the event. Both did. Along with countless other media, and how there must be at least 10,000 people waiting to get in. The event was held in the bowels of the stadium, and at a push, there was no more than at least 2,000 people inside. That said, there were no empty seats either. Gerald and his son Justine seemed the typical of the Leavers at the rally. They didn't want their picture taken, they wouldn't give their last names, and they were wary of the media, Justin says. I ask if they had got on one of the For Britain leaflets. Both nodded, and Gerald adds, "I threw it straight in the bin. Just because I want us to leave the EU does not mean I want to make Britain a country that does not welcome foreign culture. I am not scared or wary of people from overseas. I voted to leave because I think Britain is better off out of the EU. I did not consider the argument that we should stay in and reform it, but I just don't think that would happen. I think the EU works for countries like Germany and France, but for us, I think we can do much better without it. We have far more in common with the United States and Australia than we do with Europe. I think we should embrace those friendships. I think we're becoming more concerned in the last few months about a second referendum. That is why I'm here today. It would be wholly undemocratic. How can we ask the same question again? What if the result is for leave again? Will the Remainers demand yet another vote? Best of 5. But a sign of how families are still divorced over Brexit, Justin admits his mother voted Remain, and she wants another vote. Yes, we still argue about it, he says, but this is how politics has always been. We want what's best for this country. We just disagree how to achieve it. She thinks we're mad coming here today. She reckons it will be full of racists, but it shouldn't be about anything like that. I'm tired of people thinking that just because I voted Brexit, I'm a racist. It's not true. But what about the lies? What about the 315 million for the NHS, I asked. The Leave campaign were a bit naughty at times, I admit, but that, and I am sure lots of other people here would as well. But look at what the Remain campaign did. They told us the economy would tank immediately, and they could even be a third world war. That was just as bad, Justin adds. Outside the Leave Mean Leaves battle bus proves an unmissable draw for the faithful few who posed for slogans including "Stop the Brexit Betrayal" and "Believe in Britain." There was no mention of the 350 million for the NHS this time. Inside, the only thing you could buy was Leave Mean Leaves, baseball hats and beer. The crowd indulged in both. When the Star turn arrived, there was a rush to the back of the hall. Everyone, it seems, wanted to shake Farage's hand. Chris and Gilly Townsend came from Leith for the rally. They brought their 9-year-old daughter Keely as the PA system boomed out why Theresa May must chuck checkers. While the crowd waited for the cheers, Chris bounced around on his tippy toes trying to get a glimpse of his hero Farage. He should be knighted for what he's done for this country, the 48-year-old said. I've been a fan for a lot of years, although I never voted UKIP. I've always voted Conservative, and Nigel is a proper Tory in mind. That is what we need to get the party back. I think we will get Brexit through. It has to happen, in fact. I am more confident than ever we will get a decent one now the EU is playing silly beggars. It is the best thing that could happen, I think, because we have more of a chance of getting a no-deal Brexit. We don't want to be shackled to the EU any longer. It is time to turn our backs on them, and when we get on with rebuilding the damage that has been done to this country. None of it has been caused by the EU. I don't know if he's even aware of that. When Farage did take the stage, he spoke after Hawley, who went down well with the crowd. The only cheer louder than Chris's was his daughter Keely. I asked her if she knew who this was, and he said that Dad talks about him a lot. Farage explained how he had been forced out of retirement to ensure Brexit happens, to cheers and applause. The gangsters and, quote, bully boys of the EU were told to read some history books about how Britain reacts when we are up against it. To almost mass hysteria, Farage said out-of-touch career politicians did not want to respect the referendum, and a renewed cross-party campaign was needed to stay on course for Brexit and counter the negative narrative in the media. So, essentially all these news stories about the facts that have been said time and time again would happen. All these problems that were ignored by the Leave campaign and basically said that, oh, that's just Project Fear, it'll never happen. Now apparently there needs to be, according to Farage, a cross-party campaign to counter the narrative of these bad Brexit stories. So basically Farage has said that he wants a propaganda campaign. Whatever, oh, well, yeah. You know what I think of Farage. So I think it's time that our elected politicians began to feel the heat over the extent of the betrayal, he said. After Farage, David went last. He rattled on about technical details of leaving the EU, leaving the crowd for the most part rather bemused. Here was Brexit in a nutshell. Passion aplenty, detail, and despitefully unconvincing. So here you had someone who, I mean, that sums up the narrative and what happened in Brexit. You had sort of the star power, shall we say, of Nigel Farage coming on and saying everything everyone thinks is true about the EU, and none of it was true. It's one of these things that a lot of people don't seem to understand, and I've said this before. There are two things that really won Brexit, and that was the thing that for the past 40 to 30 years there has been a constant PR campaign of negative news stories against Europe, and they have Europeanized failure and nationalized success of anything that the European Union were involved with which failed. It was the EU's fault. But anything that succeeded, then it had to be the UK's reason for success. It was because we were the UK, that's why it succeeded. Even though it was in partnership with the EU, it had nothing to do with them, it was all to do with the UK. And that's where we get this ridiculous narrative, because I've said it time and time again, you've got to understand that a lot of people are brought up with this idea and notion of the British Empire was like the best thing since sliced bread, and we had this massive trading empire. And I've said before, the whole reason we had this trading empire was because of the British Navy and the army, which would basically, if you didn't open your ports to British merchants, a gunboat would turn up and then start blockading your ports. And if you still didn't acquiesce, it would start bombarding your ports. And if you still didn't do that, then the foot soldiers would come and then take over your capital, and then they would force the country's leadership to sign the trade deal. That was what was happened. That is how Britain became the most powerful trading nation on the planet. The idea that we can somehow replicate this is complete fantasy. Our closest trading partner is with the EU. Not only that, 80% of our economy is based on services. And the only trade agreement in this entire world that does a trade agreement on services is the EU. We are at a massive, massive crossroad, and this is going to cause so much damage. The GDP of the UK, certain parts of it, is just going to vanish completely overnight. And the idea of that we'll become better and somehow greater is complete fabrication. Because even if we have a place on the World Trade Organization, we are going to be ignored in favour of Europe, the USA, China, India, all these countries that are far more better, far more stronger, and far more powerful in us in terms of trade. We are nothing. And I know that angers a lot of people to hear that, but that is the truth. And the quicker you admit that and realise that that is the truth, the more quickly you will realise Britain needs to be in a strong trading alliance like the European Union, that all those 27 countries alone have little to no clout in the world, but combined together as the European Union, when they go for trade agreements or try and get new trade deals, they are a lot stronger.